I was able to kind of help, all of a sudden, we were able to put my relationship back together. And here we are today, almost a year or so later, with probably the greatest relationship I've ever had in my life. My wife and I have different tools now that allow us to, help each other, fill each other's needs better, communicate better, understand each other more. And it's an amazing journey that I've been on. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was one of the most trying times of my life. It was extremely, extremely difficult, but I truly believe now that those times are the times that try us, but they also can launch us into
Right.
great things. And that's my whole approach now in life, is just to take those things that feel like they're so challenging, so hard, it feels like we're being punished. We're not being punished. We're being challenged. We're gonna rise to that. If we do it properly, we can use that experience to launch us into an amazing journey and for greatness.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where we embark on a transformative journey to help you live your best audacious life ever. I'm your host, Audley Stephenson, and it's a pleasure to be here with you, sharing this space. And I truly appreciate you for spending time out of your busy day to join us. And really do hope that you find the insights and stories shared here, not just informative, but also inspiring. Now, for a moment, I want you to imagine a phoenix rising from the ashes, a symbol of hope and the renewal after significant turmoil. Just as this majestic bird transforms its pain into power, we too can find strength and resilience in the face of adversity. Life may bring challenges, there's no question about that, and sometimes they feel insurmountable, yet within those struggles lies the potential for growth and transformation. Self-awareness and personal growth can lead to profound changes in our relationships, allowing us to reconnect with others in deeper, more meaningful ways. Open communication and setting healthy boundaries are vital components, of any healing journey that we embark on. When we understand our emotional needs and behaviors, especially through frameworks like integrated attachment theory, we unlock the door to healthier relationships. Now, this episode is dedicated to exploring these themes as we engage with our remarkable guest. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Bryan Power. Bryan is a great guy. He's a personal development coach who specializes in helping individuals navigate relationship challenges. Bryan's own personal journey through turmoil to renewal, if you will, has shaped his mission. And really, it's to empower others to turn their failures into successes and foster healthier, more fulfilling connections. With a deep understanding of integrated attachment theory, he brings invaluable insights into emotional healing and relationship dynamics. I got to tell you, Bryan's experiences and expertise make him an ideal guest for this episode as we delve into the complexities of relationships, the importance of self-awareness, and the transformative power of open communication. His story really does resonate with anyone who's been faced with challenges in their relationships and seeks hope for renewal. I gotta tell you, like Bryan, he's so incredibly passionate about it, his experiences and his journeys, and when you hear his story, you'll know why. And so, without any further ado, let's turn to our conversation with Bryan. Enjoy. Hey, Bryan, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you for making the time to be here, my friend.
Ollie, thank you so much for having me, man. I really love your show. I love your energy, bro. You bring it every time.
Thank
And
you.
it's a true honor to be here. And thank you for allowing me to share my story here today with your audience.
Well, I appreciate, thank you for the compliment. It's really, labor of love. I enjoy what I do. And I think it's a privilege to be able to sit down and chat with people who have something to offer and share to the world. And so we do it in a very audacious like fashion. I gotta say, I appreciate the scenery. I got nice palm trees in the back, the ocean there waving. I mean,
I wish it was real.
How about audacious? See, you could have kept with it. No one would have known, right? Just go, yeah, I'm loving it, right? That's great. No, but Look, it's about conversations more than anything else. And one of the things that we really encourage is on this pathway of life, because life is a pathway. It's a journey that we're on, and we're gonna run into obstacles and challenges and things that force us to pivot, to change, transform, if you will. Our resiliency is tested at levels that we never thought were imaginable, and we have to find ways to get through that. You've got your own story, your own journey, sort of relationship chaos, if you will, that you've had to manage. And so maybe as a starting point, Bryan, I'll get you introduce yourself to our audience, talk about the work that you and what's got you to the point that you're at now.
Yeah, wow. I feel like you just told my life story right there, right? So, but yeah, the story I'm going to tell a little bit is about the relationship I had with my wife and how we kind of went from a pretty good relationship and for almost 8 years. In 2024, though, we kind of went from a good relationship to things devolved in such a crazy manner that was hard to understand. Things got really ugly, emotionally based. We got emotionally clashing and stuff, and a lot of our childhood trauma was kind of playing out. Childhood wounds were playing out. We didn't really understand it at the time, but that was really what was happening, to the point where we went from a small fight in the beginning of 2024 in February. We had a little bit of a fight that challenged us both to start seeking some therapy and some help. And as we were doing that, that was kind of a good thing, but it also kind of, we were in that zone already. Our emotions were already starting to slide. Things were really going south. And so even though we're getting some help, it almost kind of added a little fuel to the fire too at the same time. So it's kind of an interesting situation, but it devolved so much that she would eventually seek a restraining order against me, to get emotional safety. There was never any violent threats. I want to make sure that's clear, but emotionally, she just needed some space. And for her to do that, she felt like she needed to bring in a restraining order against me to do that. And when she did, I accepted that the relationship was pretty much over. I felt like it was, that this relationship, for whatever it was, I couldn't understand it, but it was over, and it was just time to move on. And luckily for me, I have a son here with her. My son at the time was 4.5. I realized I couldn't run away and move back to Florida where I have friends and family. I was stuck here. I had to stay here in Massachusetts for my son. And it really forced me to do some work on myself, look at myself,
Hmm.
challenge my faith in everything, and just see, what would transpire and what happened from there. But really, a lot of great things happened. And that's the crazy thing from this. Almost from that restraining order, the start of that, things really began to change. Things really began to get better. And the work that I had come across through integrated attachment theory, which I'll talk about here today, that work was beginning to take effect in my life. And I really delved into that, and ultimately was able to turn my life around, turn my relationship around, which I had no clue was going to happen, but that opportunity presented itself. And because of some of the work I had done, I was able to kind of help, all of a sudden, we were able to put my relationship back together. And here we are today, almost a year or so later, with probably the greatest relationship I've ever had in my life. My wife and I have different tools now that allow us to, help each other, fill each other's needs better, communicate better, understand each other more. And it's an amazing journey that I've been on, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was one of the most trying times of my life. It was extremely, extremely difficult, but I truly believe now that those times are the times that try us, but they also can launch us into
Right.
great things. And I love, that's my whole approach now in life, is just to take those things that feel like they're so challenging, so hard, it feels like we're being punished. We're not being punished. We're being challenged. We're gonna rise to that. If we do it properly, we can use that experience to launch us into an amazing journey and for greatness.
I mean, so much of your story that I absolutely love, and thank you for sharing. Congratulations, first and foremost. That is a big deal,
Yeah.
because you were able to do something that oftentimes doesn't end the way your story did, right? Other times it's over and that's it. And so, I love the fact that you overcome the man that you did, but I also love the motivating driver in your son. That's a big one. Sometimes we got to kind of get to rock bottom before we figure out, we got to change. And unfortunately, you didn't get all the way to rock bottom. Got pretty close, but you didn't get there. So talk about why that was so important for you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've experienced challenges in my life. It's never been easy. I grew up with a tough childhood. My parents were divorced when I was born. My father battled, drug addiction. My mom was 21 years old with two kids, two boys in the 70s. We moved around a lot. There was just a lot of chaos, a lot of craziness growing up, and that would really play out in my life, right? As I became an adult, try to have good, healthy relationships. I always struggled, never seemed to be able to kind of put it all together. And I learned from some of those, experiences for sure. But I feel like this one was different. It was again a different person, different connection with this, with my wife here, and so that was certainly a different thing. And when that devolved and that kind of hit rock bottom, I was then forced to really look at it differently. And what was great about my son is because if I didn't have my son, the truth is I probably would have packed up and ran back to Florida, and I never really would have challenged myself to change. I would have just ran away, probably like I've done in the past, right? But because of my son, I was forced to stay here, and then I was really forced to look at my wounds. It was blatantly obvious that there was still a lot of issues. And because of that awareness, it was like, okay, I have to do some things here. I have to make some changes. And I just decided that, I was going to put my head down and do this work. I was very fortunate to come across the integrated attachment theory program created by Thais Gibson out of Canada. And I had come across her work about a month before the restraining order happened. And I was already hooked into her work because I knew there were answers there. And so I at least had some hope as to the idea that I was going to be able to fix some things, be able to work on
Right.
myself, and ultimately have a good relationship with somebody. I had no idea that it was going to be my wife, and that we would have a second opportunity there. But I just knew that I had to do the work. I wanted to change. I wanted to grow. I wanted to use this experience for something good. And ultimately, I just decided to do that and see what happens. Let the chips fall where they may, and trust that I was going to get better and that my life would get better if I did the work. And that's really what happened. So.
Um, the level of resilience in those periods of adversity, man, it's something else. Um, would you consider yourself an overly resilient person prior to this, or where were you at
I
in that
mean,
space?
yeah, I would say so. I mean, I've definitely, came some challenges, right? Again, I talk about my childhood a little bit. I didn't have the upbringing that a lot of others may have had. No, I always say that as hard as my childhood was, there's many people that have had it way worse than me. There's many people that may had it a lot easier or whatever. It was my journey for what it was. That was my parents. That was the upbringing I was supposed to have. And through that, I've learned so much. A lot of that was great. A lot of great things came from my difficult childhood, and resilience, I would say, is one of those things. The
Hmm.
opportunity to accept things the way they are sometimes, and just understand that life is hard sometimes. Life is going to be challenging, but the harder and sometimes the more challenging it is, the more we can grow, the greater we can become. I,
Right.
I look at it as a gift now. I don't look at it as a curse.
I love it.
I think it's a gift that we have these challenges, because I do think I'm a lot stronger than some people are, because maybe they had a little softer or whatever. And the experience I had here was just one of the most challenging I've ever had in my life. And the emotional breakdowns, the emotional awarenesses, the challenge to, figure this out and drive through it and have faith and trust that it would all turn around and be okay. And again, not knowing the outcome, just trusting that it would eventually work its way through and I'd be okay.
Right.
Trusting that process is something that I really learned on this one, and had a lot of faith in God, and just trusted that, for me, I believe there is a God. And so that was a big part of my willingness to just accept things and move forward with that. And it's amazingly, it did turn out the way it did. So I'm truly blessed for the
Love it.
experience.
Love it.
Yeah.
You mentioned integrated attachment theory, and there's six elements of it, right? And they were integral as part of your healing. I wonder if you sort of can, let's run it through. Let's talk about them.
Yeah, absolutely. So the six core elements to integrated attachment theory are this. Number one, it's your core wounds. Those core wounds are a lot of times developed in childhood. They can develop throughout your life. A lot of times they come through repetition and emotion. So those are the things that can happen. So in instance, my father was in and out of my childhood a lot. So that developed, a core wound of abandonment, fear of abandonment through that, stuff like that. So core wounds are really that subconscious tapes that
Hmm.
we're playing that we don't even realize they're in there. And what I learned is that 95 to 97% of our decisions in life are actually made by the subconscious. So it's really just we're on autopilot, really, and
Right.
that the conscious cannot really outwill or overcome the subconscious. So even though we consciously may want X, we typically sometimes do Y, simply because that subconscious is more of the driver. So that was the first thing that I learned, is that one's huge. So that's number one. Number two is our needs, like really uncovering what are my true needs in life? What do I really want in life? And making sure that I'm chasing, if you will, the right things for me. And also, how do I fill my needs mostly on my own, right? So instead of outsourcing my needs to everybody else and hoping they can fill my needs, that gives away a lot of my power. It makes me needy. It makes other people, kind of puts them off, because everybody has their own issues in life.
Right.
We can only be so needy and reliant on our friends and other people before it becomes a problem. So how do I fill most of my own needs? Number three is my emotions. How do I gain emotional control? How do I learn from my emotions? Not looking them as negative or bad, but if I'm fearful, if I'm angry, if I have something like that, we may think of that as a negative emotion. It's not. It's really information. And then what is that information now telling me though? Like, why am I afraid? Right? What is my thoughts and beliefs that are causing me to be in fear right now? Or why am I angry? What is truly making me angry here? Why do I feel these emotions, both positive and negative? And then of course try to align more on the positive. Okay, if those things make me happy, I want more of those. And then the
Right.
negative ones I can start to work on so I can minimize those and ultimately, hopefully, get rid of them at a pretty good level, not experience that heightened negative emotions, if you will. Number four is like your boundaries. How do I set good, healthy boundaries in my life? Not being too extreme where they're just ridiculous boundaries that
Hmm.
nobody can live up to. Not being completely boundaryless, which sometimes anxious, preoccupied can be that way, where we just have no boundaries, or just like fearful avoidance will have some boundaries, but then they forget about their boundaries. It becomes complicated. But how can I get good, healthy boundaries in my life? So I always think of the boundaries are like the fence around your relationship, if you will, your life a little bit, and those boundaries kind of protect that scenario, if you will. So boundaries are just like the fence that protect our lives, if you will, a little bit. So how do I do that? Number five is like a communication. And communication is the one that I think most of us talk about. When relationships break down, it was always the communication breakdown, right? The problem I find is that we have different ways of communicating. And because sometimes I may be saying X, you're hearing Y because of
Right.
your own wounds, your own thoughts, your own perception in life. We may be wanting to meet in the middle here, but because we talk differently, I always say it's like if I'm talking English and you're talking, Chinese or French, we don't
Right.
understand each other. We maybe want to say the same thing. We're just not able to get there because we're not understanding how to speak each other's language, if you.
Hmm.
How do we do that better? Last but not least is our behaviors. How do I change my behaviors? How do I act in a way that's really respectful of myself, and other people can look on and say, wow, that's a guy that really knows how to handle himself in a respectful manner, and not, fly off the handle in ways that are going to be more detrimental to my life. How do I conduct my behaviors in a way that's really more positive and actually begins to,
Right.
attract more people, attract more things in my life that are good, not negative. So those are the six more elements. And
Yeah.
when we work on all six, man, it's a game changer.
And it's important to understand that these are integral. And when you can recognize and understand how they, even like what your attachment style is, even what your partner's attachment style, it's integral in how you are able to connect or manage conflict or just exist. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. So understanding the attachment styles and how they kind of think a little bit differently gives you some understanding of your partner and of yourself. And so once we begin to understand number one ourselves, I can then begin to do the work on me because I can't do the work on them. They have to do their own work. But understanding their behavior, understanding why they behave that way does give me a little bit more insight as to how I can now maybe take that information and not internalize it as much. Understand that sometimes when a dismissive avoidant maybe wants a lot of space, that doesn't mean they're angry at me. It doesn't mean they're going to leave me. It doesn't mean that they're, hating me. That's the way they process sometimes. And that's the way they kind of really need for them to kind of really figure some things out. But if I'm anxious when that time comes, that really makes it hard for me to sit there and wait for them to figure it out, right? Now I may be pushing the buttons. Hey, let's talk about this. We got to, sit down, and they may be just like, now that the more I try to push to talk and communicate when they're in that zone, I'm just more aggravating them. And now they're
Yes.
getting frustrated, and now they're thinking, you don't understand me, you're not listening. And that's where all this conflict comes because we're just not understanding that. So the more we can gain that knowledge and then begin to change the way we behave and act in those ways, man, game changer, game changer.
Yeah, and I can see sometimes maybe it's a little bit of the chicken or the egg here in terms of I'm trying to like I want to learn about you but I don't understand you and I'm trying to communicate you but you don't want to talk to me and so
Yeah,
it's trying to figure all that out and I think one of the most important things in this is understanding what is happening in the moment, right? And if it's
yeah.
understanding that you're not on the same wavelength, at least you're not in your head anymore. Because I think that's for the oftentimes the biggest challenges occur is that I've got it all figured out in my head. I know exactly what's wrong, and the other person's doing everything that my head told me is, and there we go. And that's why we have problems.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things we always say is, can you 100% know that, what you're thinking is correct, right? Whatever that situation is. Can you 100% know that your spouse is going to leave you? No, I can't. I don't know that. Do you 100% know that they're not talking to you because they're mad at you? No, maybe they're not mad. So when I think about that, I ask that question, if I come up with that answer, most of the time I'm going to be able to say, yeah, you know what? I really don't know 100% what that person's thinking, what they're experiencing. But our mind typically goes to, certainly for me, it always goes to the worst case scenario first, right? It's always that worst case scenario. So asking that question, starting to internalize a little bit and realize like, wait a second, maybe I'm not thinking this through properly, and maybe my thinking is a little off. And that's where I can learn and change and begin to, change the way I'm thinking about the
Right.
situation. Changing that changes my behaviors because we always talk about what's called BTEA, which is beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and actions. So your beliefs will lead to your thoughts will lead to your emotions will ultimately drive your actions. And so when we can change our beliefs and thoughts, we're going to change the way our emotions now are coming at us, and then that's going to change the way we handle things, and our actions are going to change. So again, yeah, understanding and knowledge in that is a huge, huge benefit.
I'm thinking of how important the role grace plays
Mm.
in this process of um, um, being patient with your partner, or being understanding. I'll even use the word forgiveness in that, because of, again, what we're thinking, and oh my gosh, this person's doing this because, and they don't
Yeah.
understand me, and if you can sort of strip that down and exercise grace, I think it's it kind of feels like it's half the battle. No.
Yeah, honestly, what's crazy is because once we realize that we have our own issues, we're not perfect, we are broken and wounded too. And then we look at our spouse and we realize they're also broken. They're also, I hate to say broken, I like to say more wounded, right? They have
Hmm.
their own wounds, they have their own internalized, you know, bad thoughts and stuff, and some of the ways they're handling things. Once we realize that they're not maybe doing this purposely, they're doing it because that's the way they've learned. And even though it's a negative way, maybe it's not a healthy way to do it. I can have forgiveness because number one, I need forgiveness for me. Right? I need somebody to forgive me for some of the ways that I handle things and the way I'm thinking and doing things. And then if I can realize like I need forgiveness, then they also need some forgiveness and some grace as well. And so the important thing is to know this too, though. Like obviously we are responsible for our actions a little bit. So at some point we do have to take some ownerships, but we can give a grace a little bit along the way. I like to see somebody that is working on themselves, is trying to, make some things better, is willing to, come along and say, okay, yeah, I do have some things to work on. If somebody stays stuck in that zone where they're unwilling to even look at themselves at all, because that's really what started for me. I really started to look at myself and
Yeah.
realize I'm a big part of this problem. If somebody's not willing to do that, then it gets really hard to continue to, have a relationship with them. And it may come to that point where it does break down completely because if somebody isn't willing to look at themselves, do some work, then ultimately that could be a problem. But at the same time, we can give them grace and love. We can, but realize that maybe it's not a healthy situation for us, even though we care and love them. Sometimes we just do need to kind of take care of ourselves too.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the process and kind of figure out, what the attachment styles that my partner has. How do I? What's that look like? How do I do that?
Yeah, so for me, the first thing that I came across a really great webinar that Thais Gibson out of Canada did with Mel Robbins out of Boston. She has about an hour and a half long video on YouTube you can go to, and she does a really great job of explaining the four different attachment styles. When I saw that video, that was the one that really hooked me in, and I began that journey of learning more about it. And then once you kind of, you can watch some of these videos and learn all that. I always like to have people join the personal development school, which is Thais Gibson School. If you join through my website, makeyourrelationshipfail.com or myrelationshipfail.com, you can join that school through there. And that will give you number one, the best price possible for that program. But number two, I'll give you a free session with me. We'll be able to talk about your situation and see if we can point you in the right direction.
Hmm.
Along the way, though, a lot of times as we're trying to learn the integrated, these different styles and core wounds and stuff, it's really about listening and paying attention to, again, our emotions, our behaviors,
Yeah.
watching these things. And then there's some really great workbooks in the personal development school and really great things that we can start to actually do some work on that begin to reveal to ourselves how we can change, how some of the ways that we can do some things differently. And by doing this work, that again, little by little, it begins to really change us and grow. And we can wake up 3 months, 6 months, a year later, completely different than what we were before, and it's
Mhm.
beautiful. It's a beautiful
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah. And listen, as you talk about it, even your own personal journey, you can see the joy, like it's just the happiness in your face, and your excitement, and it's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. And that
I'm
really,
living the audacious life, Audley. All right,
that's
I'm,
it,
I'm
man.
living an audacious life right now. It's beautiful. Yeah, I am happy because I went from rock bottom to this amazing thing, and I just smile every day because I feel like I'm on cloud nine.
Yeah, how beautiful.
Yep.
I'm just wondering for our listeners who are kind of, maybe, feeling stuck in this moment, is there a quick sort of, intervention that they can sort of take on to sort of help them and implement in their relationship and the dynamics that exist for them right now?
Yeah, the first thing I would say, man, if you're down and out, you're in a bad spot, maybe your relationship is, at that brink, you guys are fighting all the time and having that struggle, or even if it's gotten to where I've gotten to where it's you've gone through, you're going through a breakup, it seems like it's over, it seems like there's little hope. That's all a lie. Okay, I'll tell you right now, there's always
Yeah.
hope. Things can always turn around. You'd be shocked at what can happen and how people can change and be willing to forgive and show grace if you do the work and if you're willing to change, if you're willing to look at yourself. If you stay the same, then yeah, a lot of times it's hard to do that
Right.
because why? What's going to change, right? If it's the same stuff, then maybe we've already drained that and it's gone on too long. But yeah, if you start doing the work and then that work begins to change you, you start, handling yourself differently. You have a different way about you. People start to notice that. Maybe your ex-spouse, you get an opportunity to talk to them. Maybe it's unexpected and out of the blue, here you are talking to them and they go, wow, there's something different. There's a different energy. I see
Right.
something. I see the person that I once fell in love with, and that may spark some interest again. So you can go from the bottom to the top. I always talk, my whole website is all about turning failure into success. Okay, your greatest failures can be your greatest teachers, your greatest learner. Yeah, that's where we can go. I always talk about a super ball, where a super ball, the faster and harder a super ball hits the ground, the higher that super ball bounces. And I like to think of myself as a super ball because I'm bouncing high right now. I hit hard and fast, but man, look at me now. I'm reaching the top. So, don't give up hope. But get some work done. Take ownership of yourself. Look at yourself and say, I need to show up differently. I need to, realize that I'm not perfect and how can I show up differently? And then I always like to drive people. There's different ways, maybe some therapy, stuff like that. By all
Sure.
means, you got to find what
Yeah.
works for you a little bit. But I have found something that works for me, with the personal development school and the integrated attachment theory program has been very beneficial for me.
Love the messaging around turning failure into something special and wonderful, and how we overcome setbacks. I would love, Bryan, if you could just describe when you reached that turning point moment. What did that feel like? Because I would imagine there was a lot. But first of all, there'd been a lot of frustration leading up to that point, and then to start to make that shift, and then a lot of work. So it didn't just happen. You clearly did a lot of work, and so when you reached that turning point moment, you're like, wow, like, what was that like?
Yeah, yeah, wow. I mean, and I'm giving you guys the short and fast, instead of the dirty and nasty, right? Because there was so many emotional things that happened, so much difficulty, so many challenges through this, man. Lots of tears, lots of time on the phone with friends, family, just trying to survive and fight through this and battle and stuff, right? But again, just doing some of the work along the way, but little by little, incremental, things began to change. And I would say that the part that I realized that something was definitely happening was when I did have that first conversation with my wife after a few months of not talking to her. Still had the restraining order on me, but we were able to have a quick conversation, and she let me know that she still loved me, that she didn't want to be with anybody else. That was the first eye opener that maybe I could fix this relationship. And then once the restraining order came off, about a month and a half after that, because it did still take some time. Once the restraining order came off and we were able to get together and talk and started to, spend some time together, that's when I knew that things were different, man. This whole relationship and this whole process that I went through was now changed and different. And because I didn't know, even if we wanted to get together, I had no idea that it was still going to be better. Could we actually make it work? What was it dynamics going to be like? But now all of a sudden, all the work that I had done, all the work that she had done was now beginning to pay off. And almost from out of the gate, from the restraining order coming off from that day on, we just began to really work on a relationship differently, and it just continued to grow. And from there, and I've been back in the house almost since then. As long story short, I got thrown out of my apartment about a week and a half after the restraining order came off, and I had really
Wow.
nowhere to live and stay. But I didn't move back into the house right away. I did grab another apartment temporarily, but essentially I was staying at the house, and ultimately I gave up that other apartment and have been in the house full time for almost a year now, and it's been an amazing journey. But that what I would
Beautiful.
say is when I really knew that the work was paying off, when I saw us have the
Yes.
opportunity to actually do it again and see it that it was different, and that still happens today. That's the
Mhm.
thing, is like it's not just that it happened for a short time. Like we continue to work on this. We continue to do those, utilize those tools and everything that in our relationships, that so again today we have a great relationship one that I thought I just never dreamed it could be this good, right? And this, fun and stress free and stuff like that. It's pretty awesome. So.
Beautiful story. Beautiful story. I was going to say, are there any sort of myths about attachment or maybe even relationship healing that are out there that you're aware of that you could sort of put to rest and say, well, nah, it doesn't work that way. This is kind of how it goes, or anything that you've come across?
I mean, I just think one of the things for me, I feel like a lot of times we just have a hard time, understanding both sides, and we always have, we always think it's the other person's fault. It was easy for me to point the finger at my wife. I thought she was the problem. I thought it was all her baggage, her stuff. She's looking at me thinking it's all my baggage, my stuff. The first step we have to do is take ownership and look at ourselves and accept that we have some issues. We need to show up differently and do that, and not blame the other person all the time. And then, as far as the myths and stuff like that, I feel like the myth is that the lie is that the relationship is over. Okay, I don't care how bad it looks, man. I had a restraining order against me. Trust me, leading up to that restraining order, there was a lot of, I'll never be happy as long as I'm with you. You need to get out of my life. You need to get away from me type of thing. It was just your emotions playing out. But like all these things finally hit that wall, right? And so it was naturally for me to think it's over. But at the end of the day, it's not over. It's never really over until it is, right? But anything can come back around. And that's what I'm saying is like, man, I just feel like there's always hope. There's always a chance to turn the bus around. But the key is this. I always say, look, if neither one of us did any work during that time away, we may have come back together, but at the end of the day, we'd still be in that mess, right? We wouldn't be on, this type of journey that we're on today, where we have a really great relationship. So we both had to do some work. Otherwise, we'd have just been stuck. So if I did the work and she didn't do the work, then maybe it wouldn't be as great either. If she did the work and I didn't do the work, then also again, maybe it not have worked. But if both people are willing to do some work, take some ownership for their side of the relationship, then anything can come back around. Relationships, I've seen some amazing, wonderful stories where people healing their relationships and coming back together. I have another buddy of mine was separated for 16 months from his wife. They are
Mm-hmm.
back together now after that time. Similar story, restraining order, a lot of craziness. And here they are 16 months later, healing their relationship and working back together.
Beautiful.
So there is hope, man. Just don't give up. That's the key. Don't give up. Use this experience to launch you into an amazing journey, and something great can come of this. I promise you. Yeah, just trust that it's going to happen.
Beautiful. I think those encouraging words are fabulous. Again, it just what it can do for people to get that sense of hope that you're providing, and I think your lived experience is a powerful one. For listeners that are out there and going, wow, Bryan said a lot of really neat things. How do I connect with the Super Bowl? Where do we send them? Where do we
let's
send
let's
them?
turn let's turn you guys into Super Bowl so you can live audacious lives too, right? So if you want to challenge yourself and you want to grow, if you want to learn more about me or work with me at all, go to my website, myrelationshipfail.com or makeyourrelationshipfail.com. Either one takes you to the same website, and you can take the attachment style quiz through my website first. You can learn a little bit about your attachment style there, which is
Hmm.
great. And then I always suggest that you join the personal development school from my website. When you join, and that's Tice Gibson School, when you join through my school, you'll get a great price on that. You're always going to get the same price, or if not better. And I'm going to give you a free session so you and I can connect. We can talk. I want to hear about your situation, what you're dealing with. I want to see if I can give you some pointers, maybe point you in the right direction, give you some hope. And then if you decide you want to work with me further, by all means, we could talk about how I can help coach you through the experience, maybe get you some results a little bit faster than if you decide to work on your own. But if you decide to work on your own and just, delve into that work, there is a treasure trove of information and healing tools, workbooks that we can do in that personal development school that will get you in the right direction. And, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year later, you may find yourself on the same, spot that I am, cloud nine, great relationship, feeling great about life and hopeful about the future and the way things are going. But it does start with that decision to make a change and challenge yourself to start the journey of moving forward in that regard. So.
Amazing, amazing. We'll make sure the contact details are in the show notes below for our listeners. Bryan, this is, like I said, it's been awesome. I've love this story. It's so uplifting and encouraging. And I think, without question, there are people that are listening that will, and perhaps they're in a similar situation or not happy to save their relationship. And so this encouragement you provided, and that's how I always say the value of sharing our stories, right? In terms of what they can do for others, is so integral. So thank you for this. Congratulations. And thanks for being a guest on the Audacious Living Podcast.
Man, this has been an honor, dude. I love it. I want to chat more. I just feel like I want to spend all day hanging out with you and talking with you, man. You're a lot of fun to talk with. Look at that smile, man. I love your smile too, brother.
Thank you.
This
Thank
was
you.
an honor to be here, man, and I hope we can do it again someday.
We'll definitely stay connected, Bryan. This has been great, and all the best, my friend.
Thanks, my friend. Thank you.
Back, we are here on the podcast, in a conversation with Bryan. He emphasized the idea that even the most turbulent relationships can find their way back to a place of love and understanding through effort and commitment. They have to be there or it doesn't happen. He shared his personal journey that led him from the brink of separation to a renewed, thriving relationship with his wife, highlighting the role of self-awareness in this transformation. I loved his happiness. I totally loved how he shared his story. And when you see that infectious optimism that Bryan displayed, I know, and as well as his ability to articulate how the hard work of personal growth can lead to unexpected and beautiful outcomes. It was a complete pleasure to listen to. I encourage you to connect with Bryan directly. You can find his contact details in the show notes below. He also has some special offerings, including a free session for those who join his personal development school through his website. And again, that's where you can learn more about the integrated attachment theory that he spoke muchly on, and as well how to enhance your relationships. I want to thank you for joining in this episode of the Audacious Living Podcast. I really appreciate you, again, taking the time to be here. If you found value in today's conversation, I would ask, if you haven't done so already, please take a moment to like, follow, subscribe, and share this podcast to help us grow and reach even more people seeking to live their most audacious lives. Remember, just like that phoenix, you have the power to rise from your challenges and soar to new heights. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.